Please be seated. Look at all those smiling faces out there. It's great y'all have made it here again tonight. Those that are here in person, and those of you online on your phones or on computers or whatever. Please keep in mind that if you're on Facebook, you can go to the top right-hand corner, and there's a drop-down where you can choose to look at, and I believe you can print the books also that we're working with. Tonight we're in the self-control unit. There's a picture of it right there. That's what it looks like, and got that big nice stop sign right there to remind us of that at all times. And we're going to be starting on page 48. One of the things that we need to do as teachers is always be aware of the lessons, the lesson plans, and review your lessons before you present yourself to teach a class, and be prepared. No matter how many times you've taught the peaceful solution, read the peaceful solution, and you're using it in your life, but no matter how many times, you still need to go over it. You still need to review. And so what we'd like to do, first of all, knowing we're going to be starting on page 48, let's go on over to the lesson plan real quick. And so procedure number 7, we had briefly embarked upon this, but it says to remind students that in previous lessons you learned how to use the Stop acronym. And remember the Stop acronym, of course. We've got it right here. Stop acronym, stop, think, options, proceed. And, it sounds like a little quick thing right there, but you really need to stop and think about things. Especially, you get a feeling that something you're doing could not be quite right. And this same method can be applied to controlling our emotions, of course, is what we want to do, because those feelings, those emotions come, and then actions soon follow. So we want to be very careful what we're doing. Okay, so we already have gone through applying self-control to our emotions, found on page 46. I think we covered that pretty thoroughly. And it says to have students turn to the section entitled Understanding the Main Point, found on page 48 through 51. And to complete the scenarios based upon the example as outlined in our handbooks. Discuss students' answers and point out that by practicing appropriate responses to common situations, you gain skills in how to respond with self-control. So we're going to go ahead and turn over to page 48 now. We did quite a review the last class, and so we're just going to start out right here, and hopefully we'll get to the point where we do another review of this chapter in the section What I Have Learned. So page 48 in your self-control manual, it's called Understanding the Main Point. And it says to read the following scenarios and fill in the blanks based on the examples below, or the example below. So our example for this scenario is number 1, Mindy missed the final question of the state championship academic challenge. A few team members started putting her down. One even said, "What's a loser like you doing on our team anyway?" Okay, that's pretty harsh, isn't it? Now remember what we're talking about here. Let's go ahead and look back for just a moment, just as a real quick reminder, is we want to, page 46, apply the self-control to our emotions. Yeah, and that, just think about what was said to her just then. What's a loser like you doing on our team anyway? After she's already, kicking herself and already embarrassed, because it's all kind of, laying on her shoulders, the final question, right? And so that's quite an emotional ordeal. So we want to apply self-control to our emotions. And we want to keep in mind, go on back to page 45 real quick, and we want to keep in mind, keeping it all in perspective. Is this really going to make a huge difference in your life, this one thing? Is it going to change that you're not going to wake up tomorrow, or you're not going to have any food to eat, or something terrible is going to occur just because you answered the question wrong, you missed that question, and now people are chastising you? Keep it in perspective. What is this really going to matter in your life a week from now, a month from now, 10 years from now? It's not. So let's look at the two different scenarios on how she would handle this. One of them being not showing self-control, and the other one being showing self-control. It's kind of interesting, and it could be some of you kind of think about it and think about yourselves when looking at this, whether it be the positive or the negative aspect. So not showing self-control. What kind of thoughts might she have? Now, in order to move things along in this particular teaching scenario, it's not a classroom scenario, so to speak, so I'm going to throw some out there, okay? So not showing self-control, she might be thinking, well, who in the world does she think she is? She's always picking on me. Or, man, she missed the question one time too. Who does she think she really is? I ought to tell her, give her a piece of my mind or something, And then there's the feelings. Feeling angry, embarrassed. I mean, come on. She missed that final question, the state championship, and everybody saw it. So she's already embarrassed and frustrated and hurt and disappointed. And then by this statement, it just adds to it. What's a loser like you doing on our team anyway? I mean, think about it for a minute. What would you do? What would you do without being taught the peaceful solution? Think about that. And some of you who are fairly new to the peaceful solution, or some of us old timers too, what would you do? What would you think, And then actions. Well, if she was not practicing self-control, she might, yell out, well, you're a loser too, or some choice words thrown at the person. And then possible consequences. Well, a conflict could develop. They could get in a fight. They could get suspended from school or get removed from any future state championships on this particular academic challenge. So there's a whole lot of things that could take place that would be negative because of not showing self-control. Did any of you see yourselves in that anywhere? If someone said that to you, what's a loser like you doing on our team anyway? Would you hold it together and not jump back in their face? I mean, think about it for a minute, and you don't have to raise your hand or anything, but just realize that if that's so, you might want to really pay attention to this. Now, on the next scenario there, it's showing self-control. Now, this is what she would do if she showed self-control in this particular instance. Oh, man, I've messed up now. We're not going to win the state championship. She might be thinking that and thinking, how many people saw me do that and all. And then her feelings, of course, she's going to be embarrassed by the whole thing, frustrated, hurt, disappointed, just like in the other scenario. The same feelings are coming forth, but now the actions, this is where the cool thoughts make a difference, Instead of thinking on a personal level and thinking of a personal attack on the other person, she's looking at what occurred, stating the facts to herself in her mind, in her thoughts. Wow, I messed up now. I'm not going to win the state championship. And even though the feelings are the same, embarrassed, frustrated, hurt, disappointed, she decides by using self-control and probably the Stop acronym in there, okay? She decides to apologize, and she might say, I feel really bad about this whole thing, but, I did my best, which is really how it should be. I mean, people should be able to accept that there are going to be, when there's these challenges like this, there is going to be a, quote, loser and a winner, if you will. Whereas really all that participated could be considered winners in that they got up there and did it and actually even took that risk of embarrassment and so forth. So the possible rewards instead of consequences, since she did use self-control, the conflict was avoided. There's no possibility of them getting in a fight or anything, right? Because we have cool thoughts and cool statements taking place, at least from one person, right? And so handling the situation with self-control, everything stayed together. They're not going to get kicked off the team, probably. Not going to have to go see the principal or anything like that, okay? So think about that and see where you might have done the same thing recently too. Used self-control in a particular situation which, was embarrassing, or you felt pretty bad, or someone said something to you really didn't like. Think about it. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next one. Now, Juan is at his best friend Richard's party. This is on page 49. And Richard suddenly takes out a joint and lights it up. Takes a hit and then passes it around. It is now Juan's turn to take a hit. Wow, okay. So, not showing self-control, what could be some of the things that would take place in his mind? And what would he do? Possibly some of you have been in a similar situation in the past. Hopefully none of it's coming your way right now, but it might be. Possibly some of you that are watching tonight online. Is this situation something similar coming up? Someone passes you the joint that's wringing wet with someone's saliva and, passing it around. No telling how many people have already slurped on it, So, there's a couple of reasons why not to take this and partake of it, but not using self-control. Some of the thoughts might be, oh man, if I don't take the hit off this joint, they're going to think I'm a loser, I'll never get to come to another one of the parties again. The peer pressure is a very strong thing, right? We've already covered a little bit about peer pressure in the previous lessons. But some of the feelings, of that, especially if he wasn't expecting anything like this, you could be shocked, confused, scared, if you've never done this type of thing before, embarrassed, and just overwhelmed at the entire situation. That could be the feelings, whether you're going to use self-control or not. So, but the thoughts, that thought that he had is kind of leading him down the wrong track right away. Remember, it's thoughts, feelings, actions, then rewards or consequences. So here's the action. So Juan takes the joint and starts smoking on it. All right, so the possible consequences that could come his way, well, he could lose his self-respect right there, which I'm sure he already did to some degree just by doing something like that he knew was wrong, that he shouldn't do, and that he had not done up to that point, and possibly had used self-control in some instances to that point. But that's the first thing that goes downhill, is the self-respect, the knowing that you just did something terrible and that can have some major consequences. He could start, marijuana tends to be kind of a gate opener to other drugs. I know people that are pro-drug folks will say, well, that's foolishness. No, it does not. But I can tell you, and many of you in here probably too, that yes, it does. There's no argument with that. Anybody with any experience in this situation would know that it most definitely opens the gate to other drugs and other harmful actions. So, it could harm his body and mind. Again, it most definitely will. There is no maybe or might be to it. It will harm the mind and the body. And you can act irrationally and get in trouble, parents, police, school. You could have a wreck. You could put yourself in a risky situation and die in one night. All these things take place. They take place every day. Every day in this world that takes place. And some of you out there watching tonight, there's some that are watching because of programs that you're in that that have the peaceful solution as the main curriculum in that program. And what got us sometimes into those programs are things that, we should not have done, or at least that we might be being accused of. So it's important to remember that when you put yourself in a bad situation, I would look at the whole thing and say, what was he doing at the party in the first place? But when you put yourself in a bad situation, you got to know that there's probably something bad that's going to come your way somewhere down the line in that situation. You just don't get by with it, okay? Now, in showing self-control, his thoughts might be, before he even went to the party, man, I don't want to go to that party. But his thoughts, with this having occurred, he is at the party, the joint's lit up, and it gets passed around. And some of the thoughts he might have is, man, I can't believe my best friend's asking me to do this, the right thoughts would be, I'm not going to do this for anybody. I'm not going to mess up my brain. I'm not going to mess up my mind. I'm not going to mess up my life. Maybe I need to look at this person that I call a friend and think hard about whether it's going to remain that way or not. So the feelings, shocked, overwhelmed, scared, embarrassed, just like before, just like in the other scenario, all the same type of feelings, except with one difference, now we have somebody who's kind of put their foot down. And so instead of being overwhelmed with everything taking place, what we have is some determination. We have some intestinal fortitude, some call it, putting your foot, standing firm in your beliefs and in your actions, and saying against all odds and knowing that you're probably not going to have that friend anymore, and even some others that might be at the party, Juan says, no way, man, I decided a long time ago never to do that kind of thing, and you'd be better off not doing it too. Make that statement, be firm. So what are the possible rewards that could come his way? Well, first of all, he saves his mind. If he doesn't get involved in the drugs, he's probably not going to, he's probably not going to jump in and start doing some hard drugs along the way, He could maintain his self-respect, knowing he stood for something rather than falling for some foolishness, and that he made the right choice even under pressure. And that's the hard thing, is making the right choice under pressure is a big deal. To be able to do that, man, it takes that type of determination, because the pressure was there in that situation. And think about it. Some of you have probably been there. If you have been there. If you've ever done any drugs, you've been in this situation before, something very similar in your life. Okay, well, let's take a look here at page 50. Now, this one is interesting in that Tamika was disturbing the class. Her teacher noticed and told her to stop talking and pay attention. Now, this goes on all the time in classrooms. But not showing self-control, some of the thoughts that Tamika might have would be, well, why doesn't she just leave me alone? There's other people talking too, That might be one of the thoughts that's going through her mind. Or, well, I wasn't really, taking too much time. Nobody's really paying attention. What's the big deal? Feelings, could be that she might have been embarrassed because the teacher called her out on it, angry and hurt. And by not using self-control, her action might be that she keeps on talking or mouths off to the teacher or something like that. Possible consequences could be Tamika would lose her self-respect and also the respect of the other students and the teacher. And she could have to go to the principal's office, get suspended, something like that could take place. And also, by not being corrected and going along with that, she might do that again in the future too. Now, showing self-control, on the other hand, Tamika might think, she's right. I need to stop talking. I'm not acting right. I need to stand firm in what I know is right to do. And then the feelings, of course, she'd be a bit embarrassed because she was called out in front of the students. But then the action that she needs to take if she's practicing self-control would be what? She needs to stop talking like the teacher told her to do, right? So Tamika there would maintain her self-respect, the respect of the other students, seeing that even though she did something wrong, she's willing to correct it right there on the spot, and the teacher too would really respect that okay, she did something, we corrected it, and it's all okay. Things like that are going to occur from time to time. And she would also have the satisfaction of knowing that she's learning to practice self-control and doing it right. Okay, let's go on to another one. On page 51, Muhammad was late getting home and missed his curfew. He tried to explain that it wasn't his fault, but his parents told him to stop making excuses and sent him to his room. Surely nobody's ever been in that situation before, right? Anyone sitting here? Well, I see a bunch of smiles out there and all. It must have taken place in your life somewhere. Okay, so you know what Muhammad's talking about, right? Yeah, so he started trying to explain it away. And so here's his thoughts in not showing self-control. And think about it. You might think back on a time when this occurred, and you might think what thoughts were going through your mind. Remember, the subconscious mind is very powerful. You could probably remember the situation, remember what room you were in, who was there, what time you got home, what you were doing before that, all these things, if you think about it for a moment. So some of the thoughts from Muhammad getting home late and his parents checking him on it is, they never listened to me anyway. This is so unfair. It's not my fault. I tried to tell them what was wrong, and of course the many, many excuses that could come, because you're out there doing something you shouldn't be doing anyway, or it leads to those things. But anyway, the feelings that he might have is, being angry, upset, frustrated, rejected, and of course guilty, knowing that, I should have been home, but he's not really going with that. And his actions could be, again, not practicing self-control. He could argue some more with his parents, stomp off to his room, slam the door, throw some things around, and, determined to get even or something. But his consequences could be also losing his self-respect, losing his parents' respect, losing some privileges. There's all kinds of things that could take place, and also affecting his ability to go out in the future, some of those privileges, because he's not accepting the correction. On the other hand, if he practices self-control, let's take a look at it. Man, I really messed up. I knew I should have left earlier. And his feelings, guilty, sad, frustrated, upset with himself, that guilt that comes, His actions, Muhammad could apologize to his parents, and tell them, he's determined not to do it again. Some of the possible rewards, he, of course, would maintain his self-respect, and he might still get grounded, but probably with less severe consequences. And the thought that, he practiced self-control and his parents are going to be pleased with him, and he could be pleased with himself somewhat for doing that, for practicing the self-control and understanding that he got corrected and accepting that correction. So at the bottom of page 51, as you can see from these exercises, self-control can be used in any situation at any time. And that's absolutely true. Any situation at any time. You can use it at home, you can use it at work, you can use it in a classroom situation, you can use it at the grocery store, you can use it while you're driving your car. I mean, self-control can be used everywhere and should be used everywhere. Controlling your thoughts, you can control your feelings, and in many cases, the outcome of the situation and the rewards are always well worth it. And I assure you, by using self-control, you will be controlling the outcome of the situation to a much better degree than you would by not using self-control. By not using self-control, you don't know what's going to occur. It could go any way. But by using self-control, hey, it really helps. On page 52, it says, bear this in mind. Learning to apply self-control can help you identify what emotions you feel and deal with them effectively to make wiser, more appropriate decisions. That's a lot of words right there. Let's take it a little bit slower, okay? Learning to apply self-control, so you got to practice it, and you're going to fail sometimes, and, pull yourself up and get started again. So learning to apply self-control can help you to identify what emotions you feel. And this is an important part of it. You've got to identify those emotions. And we've had a little bit of work on that, on looking at the emotions and realizing if you're behaving irrationally, and you could be very confused with some of the emotions that you have, and understanding, just like on page 32 in the self-control book, you've got the positive emotions right there that you can look at, and that's just some of them. It's positive emotions that you can identify and see that you're, doing right or not. And on page 31 of the self-control book, you can see the negative emotions, a lot of them that are listed. So if you get to a point where you can identify it, and just like the aggravation, anger, depression, disappointment, embarrassment, and fear, all these things, the jealousy, humiliation, you can look at these negative emotions, and then, let's go back to 52, you can identify what emotions you're feeling, and you can start working on those things. You can deal with them more effectively to make a wiser, more appropriate decision. If you don't know what you're feeling, then you're going to be in that confused state, which, of course, sometimes it is a little bit confusing. There's a fine line there on, the positive or the negative emotions sometimes. They're kind of hard to identify. Not always, but sometimes they are. So keep all of that in mind as we continue on here, and we're going to do a little bit of a in review on the chapter, if you will. Let's go back to our lesson plan for just a moment. That's on lesson plan 2, page E. Okay, so procedure number 8. We are going to conclude the lesson by instructing students to turn to page 53. So go ahead and feel free now to turn to page 53. And we're going to read this section, What I Have Learned. Now, it says to emphasize to students, so, really focus on it and point out to students that the need to always identify their feelings in order to respond in an appropriate moral way. So if you can identify that you're feeling angry, you can slow it down and realize that with what you learned, the next step is what you do with your anger. You've got to control. You realize, hey, I'm angry. I can feel it. Now, what am I going to do? And you can start working on controlling that anger rather than just letting it blow in the wind and get in some trouble. Or if you identify that you're feeling some fear, you can deal with it appropriately instead of jumping up in someone's face and making things worse. So it's all about using self-control. Using the self-control and identifying those feelings so you know what to do. So you know what option to choose to make that right choice. So also we want to stress that if self-control is consistently practiced, we can learn to avoid the impulsive behavior, some call it knee-jerk reaction, and control our emotions to our own advantage. And that's what we want to remember always to do. I'm going to keep on showing you this on and off. I'm sure the other teachers will point it out too while we're in this particular book. Stop and think, think about it and realize what's going on, how you're being affected by the feelings you're having. Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it humiliation? What is it? What is it you're feeling at this time? Think about that and then look at your options on what you can do. If it's a negative emotion that you're feeling, you have an option there to deal with it in a right way. You, as a student and teacher in training of the peaceful solution, you will want to look at the positive options of how you can deal with this situation and make the right choice. So there's always those other options available which are negative, but you don't want to go there. You want to identify it and stay away from the negative choices that you could make, right? Okay. Now that being said, we're going to go ahead and turn over to page 53. And this is entitled What I Have Learned. Now, what I've learned, the first bullet point there, or the first box that's checked, is emotions are feelings that include both positive and negative responses triggered by what I experience. Emotions are feelings that include both positive and negative responses triggered by what I experience. And what I'd like to do is turn to page 30. Page 30, and you can see the faces there that show, the look of the emotions on a person, whether it be kind of confused or glad or mad or sad or whatever the case might be. Emotions are strong physical and mental responses. Strong physical and mental responses triggered, and remember those triggers. A trigger is something that what? It starts a process. A trigger starts a process. If you pull a trigger on a gun, it starts the process of a spring, not expanding, but the opposite, contracting, where it would cause eventually a couple levers to move and a hammer to fall on a bullet, which would cause it to shoot. Well, it's the same, and that occurs like boom, just immediately. It's the same thing with us. These triggers, it can occur immediately if we're not careful. We need to really notice these things and be aware of the triggers that we know that might be a problem. If you already know that there's some quirk that you don't like with your coworker, or some pet peeve they call them, that type thing, these things are these things are triggers to you. Well, be prepared for them. Be prepared. Work on it. Set your mind in advance to guard that. Okay. So these emotions are triggered by what we experience. A trigger is something that starts a process. Emotions are triggered by what we hear, what we see, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch, what we think. There's so many things that can trigger this. The influences and the actions all around us have such an extreme effect on us. I'm going to continue on here for a minute because these triggers, you need to know this. These triggers can affect what we feel almost instantaneously, and our brain processes millions of pieces of information per second. Now, the emotions can occur without conscious thought and within a split second of the event that triggered them. Okay? So, and then down at the bottom, I want to mention this. The feelings that might not be so automatic or as easily identified, like fear, they could be triggered by memories and might require conscious thought. Where you actually go back in time, if you will. You remember this thing, and that's where your mind pulls up that memory bank, and that's where you're actually sitting in that room, and you can smell the meatloaf that's cooking in the oven, and you can taste the lemonade that was prepared for you by your grandmother, or whatever the case might be, or the cookies, or what was going on. Some of the feelings that you were having, even if it was 20 or 30 years ago. Right? I mean, you could think about that. That's how these things take place. And so, because you have had fond memories, you feel glad. Well, the same thing can occur on the negative part of it too. You might remember something negative, and it might get you kind of off on the wrong track there, and you bust off on somebody. and not controlling yourself. So we want to know what our triggers are, positive and negative, mostly negative to really guard those things. And we want to be able to identify the emotions that we're feeling at the time, okay? Let's go ahead and look at the next checkbox. Emotions are important. They inform me of my likes, my dislikes, and my needs, and they help me communicate with others and enjoy life's experiences. So that thing right there, they inform you. The emotions let you know if you're glad, if you're sad, if you're angry, whatever the case might be, and they help you to communicate. So it's two things going on here. The informing of, so it's letting you know, so it's actually communicating to you what you're going through, and then it helps to communicate with others because you don't even have to say anything to anybody. You can look at them with a stern look, and they already know, okay, something's going on here. Let me pay attention to what's going on here. They're displeased about something. Or you could look at somebody and smile, and they're going to realize, well, he looks like he's pretty glad. So you're communicating to them without saying even a word. It's amazing. Let's turn over to page 29. Now, in the introduction of chapter 2, which is controlling your emotions to your advantage, you have the power to control your thoughts and emotions that arise from the way you perceive a situation. Emotions are what we feel, and no one feels the same way every day, every hour, every minute of their lives. Have you ever felt cheerful one minute and this situation occurs and that fast you can feel down and depressed? I mean, just boom, boom, like someone flipped a switch. And although they change, these emotions, they're nonetheless important to our lives. So get this right here, that emotions inform us of our likes, dislikes, and needs. They also help us to communicate with others and allow us to enjoy life's experiences. But they've got to be controlled. Without emotions, life would be dull and boring. Can you imagine? I'm sure you could. Could you imagine not having any emotions? It's just like I smiled just then about this a little bit, but what if it were just like, could you imagine not having any emotions? You would not know anything about what's going on with yourself or with anybody else. It would be just like some robotic experience. I mean, come on. What would life be like? People need to know if you're sad. In some instances, I mean, they'll need to know that you're sad or that you're a little bit upset right now, or that you're really feeling glad about something, so they can appropriately adjust their behavior based upon the emotions they see, coming from you. You're communicating with them. Our experiences would be lifeless and our communication and relationships would be uninteresting. However, as important as emotions are, if they're not controlled, they will control you. Let's go on back over to page 53. All right, the next checkbox, emotions affect me physically. And stop right there for a minute. Emotions affect me physically. Think about it. Everybody here has experienced emotions today. Today, this very day, you experienced emotions. Do you know how they affected you physically? Do you know if you got kind of angry about something? Do you know how you felt? Do you know if you were joyful about something? How did you feel? Were you sad? Did it take all your energy away? Think about it a minute. Today, this very day, everyone in this room experienced some kind of emotion. We don't even have to go back, yesterday or the day before. Now, possibly you didn't experience really strong emotions, or you controlled yourself that it didn't get really carried away. But what about some days ago? Is there one back there a few days ago where it might not have been that way? Think about it a little bit. Let's turn over, hold on. Prolonged stressful emotions can be strenuous on your body, affecting your general health. Let's turn over to page 34, and about halfway down, it says not just skin deep, okay? Emotions, whether negative or positive, are powerful. They have the capacity to affect you both physically and mentally. You know, one of the things that works really well when you're kind of in front of like a crowd you don't know and you're trying to break the ice a little bit, or even if you're trying to get your point across, and this is great for teachers, it's great for speakers, but telling a story. And when I say a story, I don't mean making something up. I mean telling a story, telling a life story that's appropriate, of course, either yours or somebody else's, an event that took place and that you're aware of in somebody's life. It could be somebody you know, somebody, a celebrity or something, who knows, or even yourself. But these stories tend to bring people to reality because everyone has experienced stories in their life. Everyone has a story. You might not be able to communicate it the right way, but a lot of times you can, and it really makes it interesting because people have all experienced things and they can identify with it and say, you know, that occurred to me too. So keep that in mind. The emotions are powerful, and actually you can see that all around us too, because the news even uses emotion to get people fired up, or to get them to kind of join in with a certain thought process. Movies, they use emotions. They even have music playing in the background to tweak your emotions, whether you're supposed to be scared and it's dun 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 dun, you know, or whether it's going to be something where it's more of a joyful thing and you got this dun 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 dun, you know, or if it's going to be something kind of a more creepy nature. They play with it. If a movie had no music in the background, you know, you'd be sitting there looking at it, and you wouldn't feel the emotion that you do when these movies really do play on your emotions, and they get you to join in on certain thoughts where the movie is leading you to, and so forth. So that's something to be very careful of, because emotions are very strong. They have the capacity to affect you both physically and mentally. Physically, emotions can cause you to experience intense reactions within your bodies. For instance, some emotions can cause a flushed face, like when you're embarrassed, or faster breathing, as when you're angry, butterflies in the stomach and goosebumps on the skin when you're nervous or afraid. And then mentally, emotions can result in feeling energized or worn out, satisfied or discouraged, motivated or depressed. If not managed appropriately, some emotions can result in serious physical and mental illness. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't trying to get you to go home and watch a movie to see how the emotions were played, you know, or how it plays on your emotions, nothing like that. But I did want to bring it to your attention because a lot of people can't identify with that, whether, you know, currently or in the past. You can think about it. Even commercials on your phone, ads on your phone, commercials on the TV, on the radio. They play on your emotions. And one of the things in the automobile business that is a pretty standard statement with the trainers is when they're training salespeople, one of the most common things to get across to the salesperson is that people will pay a lot more to be entertained than they will be informed. So when you're selling that car, you better be entertaining to them, because if you're just sitting there telling them how many cubic inches of space it has in the back seat of the car, and how many people can fit in there if they're a certain weight and a certain height and a certain width, and then how many bolts are on each wheel and what diameter the bolts are and what thread pattern is in the car. You know, you start giving them all that information, they're going to go bye-bye and go to the next guy. They're looking to be entertained to get their next car. So, but I'm telling you, that's something that all sales managers do teach is to play on the emotions. Well, let's see, page 35. You know, if you look down towards the bottom of page 35, it has a little box and it says, "Warning, daily hassles are hazardous." The University of Michigan sociologist Louis Verbrugge, who followed the daily lives of 589 men and women, found that daily irritations triggered bad moods, which in turn were followed by physical troubles. So even studies have been done on this. This is not something that we just came up with. I mean, this is real, man. All right, so on the next checkbox, back on page 53, emotions affect me mentally. They can influence my mind so strongly that my ability to make rational decisions could be affected. Let's turn over to page 41. And this is talking a little bit about the way you respond, because they affect you mentally. It does influence your mind, and your ability to make rational decisions could be affected. I mean, page 40 covers a little bit of that too. But on page 41, down towards the bottom, applying self-control to any emotion, whether it's fear, joy, excitement, or anger, is an important aspect of developing character. Acting on emotions without careful consideration is called acting impulsively, and impulsive actions occur when you allow emotions to cloud your ability to think rationally. To be rational means to think sensibly and wisely, having gathered enough facts to make intelligent choices. That doesn't occur in a split second like that. Rational thinking leads to decisions that are well thought out, positive, and moral. Okay? And then page 42 also, impulsive reactions can lead to irrational behavior. It starts out with a lack of self-control, leads to irrational responses. And so keeping that in mind, you could come up with any kind of scenario that as wild as you would want to imagine about an irrational response to something. So be aware that it does affect you mentally. Hopefully it won't continue to affect you. Hopefully you start conducting yourself and making rational decisions so it's not constantly affecting you. The next checkbox is uncontrolled emotions can lead to actions you might regret. Let's turn over to page 43. And remember also on page 40, it talks about the confusing emotions and everything and how easily it would be to make the wrong decision. Go to page 43. And now we've covered this article a couple times in the past several weeks. I know Chris went into detail on it, and then the last class we went into a little more detail on it too. So, we've already seen this particular article, but keep in mind how ridiculous this was. This was uncontrolled emotions that can lead to actions you might regret. Notice the word might, because obviously this lady didn't really, or stating it to the news or when she was interviewed, she didn't seem to regret it, because she said her only regret really was that she didn't run him over one more time. So it doesn't seem that she learned much from it after spending 20 years or close to it in prison. Remember, this is the one where the lady caught her husband, with somebody else on her 11th wedding anniversary, and she got so bothered about it, she ran him down with the man's daughter in the car with her, with her stepdaughter in the car. So she had no concern for much of anybody at that time. And those were very uncontrolled emotions that she was giving into and letting them guide her life. You remember in the character unit at the very back, well, my page is actually missing, but in the character unit, one of the last things, in fact, I think it's on the last page, if you get that far and look at it, you can see where, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but it says, don't let emotions run your life. Get the facts. Remember, one of the first thing that we want you to do in the Peaceful Solution when making a decision is to be educated. Get the facts about what you're trying to decide about. Get the facts. Be educated on what's going on. And so that's what we're talking about. Let the facts guide you and make a right choice using proper moral character. You choose the way to operate. Don't let your emotions guide you. Almost always when your emotions guide you, it's going to come out not so great. All right, well, Evaluating your thoughts and emotions regarding a situation is an important part of practicing self-control. That's now page 46. Page 46 at the top there, applying self-control to your emotions. Controlling your full range of emotions requires you to examine your thoughts and evaluate what you are thinking and feeling. You want to evaluate it. Evaluate. You're thinking about it. You're deciding, okay, what is this I'm thinking? What is this I'm feeling? What am I going to change? My thoughts are hot. Let me change them to cool thoughts. I'm feeling kind of angry. Let me change that before it takes off in the wrong direction. Evaluate what's going on, and then you need to respond in a way that's controlled, well-planned, and respectful. And, of course, we have right there the introduction of course, the Stop acronym. One more time, I'm going to get it in your head there. That's what it's talking about right there. So let's go on back over to page 53. And the next box, it says, keeping things in perspective and not blowing them out of proportion will help me to respond rationally. Okay, we talked a little bit about that already, of keeping it in perspective. Again, most anything that, I can't say everything would, but most any of these little things that occur in your life from day to day, when someone steps on your toes, or they say something that you don't think is quite right, and they're talking about voting for this candidate, and you don't think that candidate is worth a hoot, or they're talking about this particular law that went into effect, and you don't like this law, and whatever the case might be. Or they like peanut butter with bananas and you don't, and you like peanut butter and jelly and they don't. You can get in an argument about the stupidest little things that make absolutely no difference in your life. That takes place on a daily basis. Think about what you're doing. I try to think about what I'm doing. I'm guilty of it too. So this is what practicing this peaceful solution is all about. It's stopping and thinking about these things. Does it really matter that they're talking up that peanut butter and banana sandwich and I find it disgusting? It's making my stomach turn. Does it really, really matter in life? No. So why worry about it? I know that's kind of an extreme example, but it applies in everything that we do every day. The car door opened and it bumped up against you. Does it matter? Do you really have to go off on the guy? Think about these things. They're small things in life. Keeping it in perspective, negative thoughts and strong emotions can cloud our ability. We can't see. We don't know what we're doing. We're so crazed. It can cloud our ability to see things in perspective and increase the opportunity to act irrationally. To see a situation in perspective means to be able to view things through some clear glasses, view things in their proper order of importance without overreacting. Proper importance. Remember, think about it. Is it going to make a difference tomorrow or the next day or the next day or 10 years from now? So even though certain situations can trigger strong emotions, it's up to you to control how you respond. Okay. Keeping things in perspective, not blowing them out of proportion. Now, on the last checkbox, when I stop, think, and consider my options, do I need to hold it up there again? The sign, remember the STOP acronym? We're all starting to kind of get it in our head, right? It really is amazing when we can start using that, I know that a lot of people know what this is. Anybody who's been learning the peaceful solution for any period of time knows about this. But do we use it in our daily life? These are really the steps. We're learning it in this chapter right here. You are learning how to practice that very thing, that STOP acronym, by learning to evaluate the thoughts and the feelings that you're having and keeping it in perspective so that you can make a clear, rational decision on how to continue and how to behave yourself. It's easy to look at somebody else that's not behaving properly and it's a little bit crazed and going off on someone and thinking, man, what a nutcase, I mean, it's easy to look at someone else and say that, right? But what about us? What about if we're doing it? Others are probably looking and saying, man, what's wrong with that guy? Keep it in mind. Keep it in perspective. This is what we're learning right now, how to do this. So when I stop, think, and consider my options, and then proceed by making a positive moral decision, I'm able to control my emotions. And I think we already turned over there, but page 46 on applying the self-control. We just talked about evaluating what we're thinking and feeling. We actually went over this already, but it doesn't hurt to do it again. Controlling our full range of emotions requires us to examine our thoughts, evaluate what we're thinking. And something about that word evaluate, even though we're looking at it and deciding and thinking about what we're doing and where we're going wrong, our values, that word right there, it has value in it. Our values have an effect on how we're thinking about these things. If the situation arises ever in our life to where the thought might be, or the situation we might think, or others might think and be pushing us towards it, to where there might be some thought of like even taking a human life, if you have a high value on human life, when you're evaluating that situation, you're not going to go that route. You're not going to take that life. If you have such a high value on human life to where you would never, ever, ever do it under any circumstance, you know what? You're not going to go the wrong route. You're going to use what you have, those values inside you that you've built up using proper moral character education, and with the positive character traits that you're going to put them to work instead of the negatives, and you're going to say, no way. Or even when it comes to stealing, if you have a very high value placed upon not trespassing and stealing, you're not even going to be swayed to do that. So see how important our values come into play. Remember, it's kind of like this diagram right here, it's all kind of synergistic. It all works together in this big circle that just keeps going around and around and around. It just goes around and around. It's this big circle of one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. And that's what we have to keep in mind, is that it does all work together. Just because we're talking about self-control right now, which you have to practice any part of the peaceful solution, you have to have self-control to practice the character traits. You have to have self-control to practice accepting others. You have to have self-control to be responsible in your daily life. You have to have self-control to show respect. But what are you going to do? How are you going to feed that self-control? What are you going to do when it comes time to consider your options? When it comes time to think about it and consider those options, what are you going to do if you haven't learned some respect? What are you going to do if you haven't learned acceptance and responsibility? What are you going to do? You got to have it all. It all goes together. See? But this self-control that you're learning right now is the foundation of a great moral character, and that's what we need to really work on, being able to practice that self-control when we first start kind of, getting that feeling, okay? That feeling starts coming, all right? Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here tonight and being online with us for the class, however the case might be. And I'd like for all of us to consider, even when you leave out of here tonight, now's a great time to start practicing it. Control yourself. Evaluate your thoughts and your feelings. And then let's do it again tomorrow. Let's go to sleep tonight with that thought on our mind, and then let's wake up in the morning with that thought in our mind and go to work and make everyone's day a great delight. Because I saw a lot of smiling faces out there, so all you great smiling people, let's put it to work, okay? And thank you for coming. Oh, next class will be on 4-3. And that'll be on Sunday at 5:30 p.m. We look forward to you being here. I believe Chris will be teaching that class, so everybody join us, okay? It'll be great. Thank you.